Hello and welcome. In this video, we'll be covering a commonly requested topic and diving into the world of Kill Team with the forces of the Adeptus Mechanicus. However, as my knowledge is somewhat limited within the Kill Team rule set, I decided to invite some special guests to the show today who are from the YouTube channel Command Point, and they specialize within the Kill Team scene. And at this point, would my special guests please introduce themselves?
Hey,
Hey,
okay.
I guess we're both going at the same time then. I'm Shane.
I'm Ryan.
Yeah, and we're Command Point. Thank you very much for having us on, man.
It's great to have you on. Let's dive right into the content, with the first question being the obvious one, is what would you say is the biggest selling point of Kill Team outside of the lower price of entry that Kill Team offers to existing players and new players alike, whether it's someone who's already a 40k player and wants to play an additional game, or someone who is brand new to Warhammer altogether and is looking to get into Kill Team for the very first time, as well as any kind of Warhammer franchise?
I think what has the most appeal is that in big 40k you kind of have like your like battle line units, right? You've got like intercessors, like Skitarii Vanguard, stuff like that, and they don't really get a lot of the spotlight, but I think in Kill Team models like those can really shine, just kind of like your basic infantry units.
Yeah, and on a hobby side, the idea of painting an entire squad it can be pretty daunting, especially when it's just one piece of a big army. But with Kill Team, I know a lot of hobbyists will look at the game and see it as an opportunity to really kind of dive into painting individual models and kind of adding that extra bit of character that you might not be willing to do when it's one in 100 of nameless, I guess, just kind of grunts that you're putting down on the table. But with Kill Team, you can really personalize it a little bit more.
As a rather slow painter myself that enjoys taking the time to kind of put the detail on a model, I can definitely see that being something that would appeal to people like myself. Now, from what I've seen of Kill Team, it does seem like a lot of the rules within the Kill Team system are very similar to those in the 40k rule set, but it does appear that Kill Team has a lot more modifiers in play than 40k does. Would you say this is a correct assumption being made on my part? And if so, what would you say the biggest differences between 40k and Kill Team are?
You're right. You're definitely right about there being a lot more modifiers. Shane and I, we've kind of just sort of are dipping our toes into ninth edition right now, and things like modifiers to hit, modifiers to wound. There's a lot more ways of getting those, I guess, in Kill Team. And then another thing that separates Kill Team from Big 40K is the injury roll, and that's probably one of the hardest things for like brand new Warhammer players or like experienced 40k players alike to kind of wrap their heads around, because there's nothing like it in big 40k.
And what about the Forge Worlds? They seem to be for the most part the same as they are in 40k within Kill Team in terms of rule sets. However, in the Supplement Engine War, the Forge Worlds received special cannicles as well as the ability to make custom Forge Worlds. Is this the same in Kill Team, or has that not quite reached it?
No, I don't think so. It was most in line with before the Engine World book, so I don't think any of those are in Kill Team at this time. There's no way of like making like a custom Forge World, you know.
The next question would be, where would you say Admech fall within the rankings in the Kill Team system? In 40k, for example, they fall in the S tier with armies like Harlequins and Sisters of Battle. Would you say this is true for Kill Team as well, or would you say they fall somewhere else within the power level of Kill Team?
Yeah, I would say that Admech and Kill Team are relatively high tier, especially once you enter different points values. Like for a long time, we played at 100, but I think they're a bit stronger at 125. They've always been viewed, at least in our eyes, as a kind of a high skill cap army where they wouldn't be the best to pick up if you're new to the game or you're new to Kill Team in general. But if you're looking at it from a competitive standpoint, you can take the faction very far, and we've seen that with players like Alex Squires, who took them all the way to second at last LVO. But because they're such a difficult army to pilot well, there haven't been kind of a big wealth of AdMech players, but we have seen what the faction's capable of.
That actually brings up an important question that I've overlooked at this point. What is the normal point value of a Kill Team game? For example, the normal game size in 40k is 2,000 points. What would you say the point value is for Kill Team in that sense?
At this point, right now, I would say 125 is at least the most balanced way to play the game. There are some packets that still run 100 points, like the Nova tournament, which is one of the biggest tournaments in the United States, still runs 100 point kill team. I don't know if there's any plan to change that in the future. And over in Spain, which has a pretty robust kill team scene, they still play at 100 points. But everywhere else that I've seen is either playing at 125, or there are some communities that have moved on to 200 point commanders, although I don't know how much that's going to catch on, if at all. on a wider scale. I would definitely look to 125, though. I think it's the best way to play the game.
And in that regard, what would you say are some of the strengths of the Adeptus Mechanicus within Kill Team?
Well, you can look at them as a shooting army or as a melee army, depending on how you want to run them. But I think at the end of the day, one of their biggest strengths is their flexibility, not just in terms of list building, but on the fly adaptability, just because of things like Canticles of the Omnissiah, being able to kind of switch up your game plan on the fly, kind of mid game. But as far as specialization goes, the ability to run, I think it's 6 plasma calivers you can run in a single list, especially with double omni specs, you can basically be one of the deadliest shooting teams in the game, if not the deadliest. And then the potential that comes with something like Ryza running more of Sicarian Ruststalkers or Fulgurite Electro Priests, you can really pack a punch in melee too. But I think the best way to handle it again is kind of approaching it from a perspective of flexibility. So having your gunners and then having a little bit of a front line with Fulgurites or Sicarian models to kind of protect those as the game goes on.
And that's really interesting, as that seems to be very consistent with what 40k is, where Admech is a very powerful but difficult to learn army that can do pretty much anything successfully if the army is built to fulfill that task. Though let's say you're a new player looking to get into Kill Team for the first time, and you can only buy one kit for budget reasons, what would you say the best kit would be in the Adeptus Mechanicus line for a player just getting into the game as a whole?
I would probably have to say the Skitarii Vanguard / Skitarii Ranger box, just because that's where you're going to be getting your plasma calivers from. And then moving on from there, it kind of depends on what you're going to be building for. But me personally, I started off with getting a box of the Sicarian Infiltrators just because I think those models are so cool.
Yeah, kind of like Ryan said, I think the starting point would be the Skitarii Ranger and Vanguard box. Those models, you can get about 10 of them. You have enough in there for a 100-point kill team. You're not going to quite have that frontline capability that I was talking about earlier to kind of protect your gunners. You can sort of get it a little bit. One of the alphas is going to be your leader, whereas the other alpha you can kind of have as a sort of flex melee model to play that role. But as far as just value is what you're going to get out of a box, the Skitarii box I think is the way to go. And then from there you can either look at the Electro Priests or the Sicarians.
So both of you mentioned the Sicarians, and that's rather interesting because the Sicarians in 40k are kind of a weaker unit. What would you say makes the Sicarians such a strong unit in Kill Team? As I've heard people mention them before, and I'm kind of curious.
Well, I think they're very interesting models. For starters, 2 wounds. Any multi-wound model in Kill Team is worth looking at just because of the nature of the injury roll and how many 1 damage weapons there are in the game. Having a 2 wound 4-up save is a pretty strong profile to start with. On top of that, once you get into the deeper, like the more nitty gritty of those models, infiltrators are phenomenal flex models. They have really good shooting capabilities and melee capabilities, which is almost unmatched by most factions in the game. I'd say aside from Drakari Mandrakes, most factions don't have anything quite as flexible as a Sicarian infiltrator. And then the Ruststalkers are phenomenal in melee, especially in a Ryza team that allows you to reroll wound rolls of 1, just because the Ruststalkers you can really build around their mortal wound potential, which is another thing in Kill Team that can be very, very effective.
That's great to hear because the Sicarians are some of my favorite models, and I know a lot of people enjoy them as well. So it's nice to hear that there is a place that they can be played, as right now in 40k, some people do play them, but it's not incredibly common to actually see them on the tabletop there.
Yeah. You see that a lot in Kill Team, where there's a lot of models that aren't really shining in big 40k right now, but they have a place in Kill Team where they're very effective.
And while we're on the topic, both of you mentioned getting the Skitarii Ranger or Vanguard box. However, one thing I wanted to see is if there's any room to get the Start Collecting Kit, as the Start Collecting Kit is one of the best valued kits for 40k when starting an army. However, I can obviously see that the Scorpius isn't playable in Kill Team, but does the Engines here have some room in Kill Team in case someone wants to get the Start Collecting Kit and use it mostly for Kill Team, as well as having the option to expand it to 40k down the line?
I'm not 100% sure. I'm not too familiar with the world of commanders and Kill Team quite yet. It's something that we as a community haven't really fully dived into. But I believe if the engines here isn't in commanders already, you could at the very least probably create a pretty accurate proxy through that model for one of the other tech priest commanders that Adeptus Mechanicus has to offer. I found it. The engine sphere is a commander model in Kill Team, so that is something that you can use.
So I have watched some of your videos, and one of the ones I watched was the Admech video, which was very interesting to me because in that video you mentioned Metallica as being one of the better Forge Worlds within the Kill Team system, and that surprised me because Metallica is probably the weakest Forge World within the 40k system, and that was rather great to see because Metallica is a rather popular Forge World with a nice paint scheme that a lot of people like, so it would be good to have a place for them to be able to play the Forge World if they aren't able to play it within the 40k system. What would you say makes Metallica such a powerful Forge World in this situation?
Yeah, I would say that so far in competitive Kill Team, the only times we've seen really, really big successful runs with Admech have been with the Metallica subfaction, Forge World rather. And really the utility of it comes from being able to advance with your assault weapons without taking the penalty to hit. Because the plasma calibers are so huge in Kill Team, and those are assault weapons, being able to fully utilize that mobility that comes from having the assault weapon without having to take the penalty to actually taking that advance with all your gunners is something that's really huge. And on top of that, the Corpuscari Electro Priests are another model that I think have a lot of potential with the Metallica subfaction just because of the assault profile and their electrostatic gauntlets. It allows them to just get around the board faster and still provide a pretty consistent range threat.
And going off of that, if Metallica is the first place Forge World, what would you say are the second and third place Forge Worlds within Kill Team?
So Mars is definitely one that I've heard people playing. It's a bit more on the random side, so it hasn't really been explored competitively that much, but I've heard accounts from other players saying that while it might not be the most competitive one, it's one of the scariest to play against just because there is the potential to just get your opponent rolls 2 Canicles and gets like an amazing draw. Outside of that, though, the only other one that I've really seen competitively utilized is Ryza, which I kind of touched on earlier a little bit, which is reroll wound rolls of 1 in the fight phase. You can really pair that with the Sicarian Ruststalkers and the Fulgurite Electro Priests to kind of bump up your mortal wound potential.
That's really interesting because that seems to be a complete inversion of what it is in 40k, with Mars being the top dog, and then something like Metallica being the weakest Forge World, and Ryza being very fringe in nature. With that being said, let's change gears a little bit because we've looked at the various strengths that the Admech provide. However, if you had to tell people to avoid a certain unit in terms of purchases early on, what would you say is something players should avoid buying due to it not being completely optimal within the Kill Team system?
I mean, I think it's tough to say just because all of the models that they do have in Kill Team are pretty effective in their own way. They don't really have any bad models, at least so far. I think the only thing I would say avoiding if you're really going to dive into that faction specifically is starting with just a box of Electro Priests or Sicarians. I think if you're going to have those models, pair them with the Scutari models and use those to kind of complement rather than, as fun as it sounds, running an entire Sicarian team or an entire Electro Priest team might not be the most optimal way to have, I guess, success. That being said, those models are super cool. So if you're just looking for the fluff or you just want to play for fun, by all means, go and do that. But I would avoid just starting with those if you're going to just start with one box.
Once again, it seems like Admech have a lot of similarities in Kill Team to 40k, and that most of their units are good in both systems. It's just a matter of which ones you pick first and which ones you pick up later down the line, once you're ready to fill in some niches within your army. Now, pursuing this line of thought, what would you say are some weaknesses of the Admech army, or things that they just happen to be weak against?
As far as weaknesses go, they struggle a little bit with morale more so than other factions. The one thing that they have to kind of counteract that a little bit is start taking Electro Priests. Those models have a slightly better leadership, so it reduces the chance that your kill team is going to break or you're going to run into serious morale problems. Outside of that, though, none of their models are that durable. I mean, the Sicarian Infiltrator and Ruststalker having 2 wounds is really nice, but they're still a toughness 3 at the end of the day. And that's the same for the Electro Priest and the Scutari Rangers and Vanguards. So they aren't the most durable. You want to try and keep them safer if possible, but they are very good in shooting. So I guess they're better at a distance. Usually, once that gap is closed, especially onto the Scutari models, you might start running into problems. So the biggest challenge ultimately with the faction, I think, just comes from getting used to the play styles and learning how to balance where to put your models on the table and making sure that you can keep those squishier models safe.
Now that we've covered the various strengths and weaknesses of the Admech, taking that all into account, what kind of player would you say would like playing the Admech, or who would the Admech attract in terms of playstyle and overall feeling of how the army performs?
That's a good question. I try to think of people I know that do play the faction, and
They're complete opposites, right?
yeah, they're all so different. If you like the idea of your opponent kind of sticks their head out for just a moment, and they get eradicated pretty much within moments. That's something that Admech does better than anybody, I think. But yeah, I mean, if you really like a lot of moving parts in your kill team, if you like being able to switch up your game plan on the fly, you might enjoy the faction. I mean, they're really rewarding to play. They're not the easiest, and they certainly have a bit of a floor to learn and get used to, but they're very rewarding, and you can take them to the highest level.
That's very good because it sounds like it's very consistent with what 40k functions like in terms of Admech. So it seems like a lot of the players who enjoy Admech within 40k will probably enjoy playing Admech within Kill Team and vice versa. So it does allow for that level of consistency where a player can pick up an army and continue playing it through different game sets. And I'm always happy to hear that's the case because there's nothing worse than picking up an army, enjoying it in one game system, and then finding out it's unplayable in the other game system. However, all of the differences here seem to be differences of rule sets versus actual physical differences in terms of what you have to buy in most cases. With that being said, is there anything you think we've missed or omitted or didn't cover enough in these questions that you would like to add at this time?
Shane, would you want to talk about their stratagems for a minute?
As far as stratagems go, I mean, they've got some interesting ones. There's nothing that's like stands out far above the rest. You could do some pretty interesting stuff with like taser goads, looking at some of the Conqueror Doctrina Imperative, I believe, stuff like that, just to like increase the chance of exploding sixes basically, and getting a lot of hit rolls in Kill Team. It can be pretty crazy. Outside of that, though, the only thing that comes to mind that we didn't touch on is the Blackstone Fortress model UR25. He is playable in Kill Team. He's pretty expensive, especially considering Admech isn't the cheapest faction to run points-wise. He runs at about 30 points, but he is a really interesting model to look at. He's got like something like 3 wounds. He's got a heavy bolter and a power claw, and he regenerates wounds every round, which isn't an ability you see too often in Kill Team. And he would be the only, I guess, durable option that the faction could take. Granted, they can only take one of them, but if you have that model or you own Blackstone Fortress or anything and it's something that interests you, I would say check it out because it is a really cool model and it's probably a fun one to play as well.
Yeah, I remember in one of our tournaments, Shane, our friend Ray took UR and basically just plopped him in the middle of the board. And because of the matchup, the faction matchup that he had, his opponent literally could like just not damage him enough to pick him up off the board.
Yeah, he's a good counter against like psychic factions or something. He'll sit there and eat side bolts all day and then regenerate wounds, and it's definitely a change of pace from what Admech might be used to.
That's very cool to hear because I do like the UR model, and I was always kind of upset that you couldn't play it within the 40k system, unlike some of the other Blackstone Fortress models, which are all pretty good. Anyway, thank you for coming by and helping with this introduction to Kill Team. It's been very informative, and if players were interested in learning more, where could they find you guys on YouTube and other social media?
You can find us on YouTube at Command Point. I think our Instagram is literally just Command Point. And then our Discord, the Command Point Discord server, there's a link to that in every single one of our YouTube videos. And I'll give you the link as well to put in the bottom of this video. So if any of your viewers or listeners would want to come on over to our Discord server and try to get a game of Kill Team in and see what it's all about, that'd be pretty cool.
Definitely, I'll be happy to put the link in the description below, as well as a link to your YouTube channel, and I suggest anyone who is either interested in learning in Kill Team or found this video interesting to go check out their channel, as I watched several of their videos, and I found them very informative, as well as making me interested in learning more about Kill Team, if nothing else.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you've developed at least somewhat of an interest. It really is a great game to play, and it's super easy to get into as well. So, I mean, I can't recommend it enough to people.
Yeah, thank you for having us on. This has been awesome.
Anytime, we should do this sometime in the future again.
Absolutely.
And once again, thank you for stopping by. For those of you who enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and share, as well as going and checking out the Command Point YouTube channel. As always, thank you for watching, and have a great day. Bye.